so beautiful and such a divine beauty. These beautiful flowers reminds us how lucky we are living in this world. Good morning, class. Today is the day we are gonna learn about the flower which brings colors to your world and let you grow. Let us start with the structure of a bisexual flower. A flower can be defined as a specialized shoot in which the leaves are modified into floral structures. There is a pedicel or the stalk which supports the flower. Some flowers may be without pedicel or the stalk, and such flowers are called as sessile flowers. The tip of the stalk may also be enlarged to form a cup-shaped structure called receptacle or thalamus. The floral parts are borne on the thalamus in 4 whorls. First whorl, green sepals. These are collectively called as the calyx. Second whorl, it's a large, brightly colored petals, collectively called corolla. Third whorl, which is called as a male part, it's a long thread-like structure, somewhat projecting out, and each usually ending in a bilobed tip. These are stamens, and they are collectively called as androecium. Each stamen consists of a thread-like filament and a bilobed anther. Remember, the third whorl will be the male reproductive part of the flower. Come for the fourth whorl, which is generally called as female part, which is centrally located pistil that may be formed of a single female unit called the carpel, or several carpels fused to form the gynoecium. Each carpel consists of a basal ovary, middle style, and uppermost stigma. And here, the fourth whorl, that is gynoecium, will be the female reproductive part of the flower. Flowers may be male, female, or bisexual flowers. The anthers of the stamens produce pollen, which forms the male gamete. The ovary of the carpels bear the ovule, which encloses the female gamete. The stamens and carpels are the male and female parts of the flower, respectively. The flower which contains both stamen and carpel is called bisexual or hermaphrodite flower, and examples are hibiscus, rose, lily, and tomato. The flower which has only one of these parts, that is only the stamen or only the carpels, is called a unisexual or the incomplete flower. Example, papaya and palm. A unisexual flower which contains only the stamen is called the male or staminate flower. The flower which contains only the carpels is called the female or pistillate flower. Now it's time to know about pollination. Pollination is a process in which the pollen grains from the anthers are transferred to the stigma of a flower of the same species. There are 2 types of pollination: self-pollination and cross-pollination. In case of self-pollination, it may occur within the same flower or between 2 flowers on the same plant. Here, the pollen grains from the anthers may fall on the stigma of the same flower or on the stigma of another flower on the same plant. Second type is cross-pollination. It occurs between two flowers on different plants, but the plant should belong to the same species. There are few agents for the cross-pollination, and these agents include insects, wind, or water. When insects helps in pollination, such kind of pollination is called insect pollination. And a few insects which helps in the insect pollinations are as follows: butterflies, bees, and other insects. Characteristics of insect pollinated flowers. These flowers should be large with colored petals to attract insects, and it should be scented to the insects, and these must contain nectar which serve as a food for the insects. And this plant produces large amount of sticky pollen grains. Examples of the insect pollinated flowers are marigold, dahlia, and salvia. The second type of agent which helps in the cross pollination is wind. When wind helps in cross pollination, the pollination is said to be called as wind pollination. The plants are maize, palm, pine, etc., which produces dry pollen grains in a large amount. When these flowers mature, the pollen grains get blown away by the wind, and these pollen grains may fall in the places, and some may even get washed. Characteristics of wind pollinated flowers. The plants are usually small and they are dull colored. They have a long anthers so that the pollen grains may get blown off easily. And of course, even the wind pollinated flowers also should produce a large amount of pollen grains. And the pollen grains must be light in weight for the easy carry. Third kind of agent which help in cross pollination is the water. Pollination where water acts as an agent is known as water pollination. Vallisneria is one of the good example of the water pollinated flower. These are the aquatic plants where male flowers are submerged in water. When it is matured, it gets detached and float on the surface of water. As soon as these floating male flowers happen to come in contact with the female flower, the pollen grains are transferred to its stigma. Characteristics of the water pollinated flowers. The flower should be small and light so that it can easily float on water. Male and the female parts are born on the separate plants, and pollen grains must be produced in a large quantity. Another important topic is the fertilization. Fertilization is the fusion of male cell with the female cell to produce zygote. The male cell is the germ cell and the female cell is the egg. After reaching the stigma of the flower, the pollen grain absorbs moisture from the stigma surface and begins to grow a tube. This tube is referred as the pollen tube. The ovule develops into seed. The covering of the ovule gives rise to the seed coat, and the ovary containing the seeds develops into a fruit. Fertilization in flowering plants flowchart is as follows. First, pollination should take place. Secondly, germination of the seed should take place. Later, penetration of ovule with the help of the pollen tube, and last, double fertilization or simple fertilization, where the fusion of the male cell with the female cell to produce a zygote. Let's know about artificial pollination. Artificial pollination means transfer of pollen grains to the stigma manually. Nowadays, it is practiced by the plant breeders for developing varieties of plants. The breeders usually select two different varieties of a plant with the desired characters. Say for example, one type of the crop plant may be high yielding variety and the other type may be the disease resistant variety. When these two are crossed, after selecting the male and the female parts out of the two, the anthers from the flowers of a female plant are removed. These female flowers are then pollinated with the pollen grains taken from the flowers of the male plant. This type of artificial pollination is generally employed for the crops like rice, wheat, maize. And this is all about the chapter Reproduction in Plants. Thank you. Have a good day.